Sister mocked me for years while parents watched. Then they skipped my wedding to protect her ego. I stayed silent, and it cost them everything. I, a 28-year-old female, married 8 months ago after being in a relationship for 4 years. Everyone attended the wedding except my parents and my sister, 26F. I was not shocked that my sister did not attend, because she and I had never gotten along well. I issued an offer to out of politeness and common civility, but my parents' absence was unexpected. It's no secret that my parents have always preferred my sister to me. She has always been better at almost everything. She is obviously more conventionally attractive than me, because I am small and overweight, and she is supermodel material. I am not even exaggerating. If I'm not mistaken, she dabbled in modeling while in college and was part of certain assignments, but she became too preoccupied with her studies and quit. She has a business degree, and shortly after graduating from college, she accepted a job offer from a large corporation and began rapidly climbing the corporate ladder. She's young, attractive, and accomplished, and my parents have always been prouder of her than of me. To be honest, I do not blame them for this. She is the girl they can truly brag about. In comparison, I am quite ordinary. I don't refute it because I lack both attractiveness and intelligence. I'm not disparaging myself. I'm simply being practical because, while I'm not as accomplished as she is, I'm still content with my life. It used to sting that my parents weren't as proud of me as they were of her, and they didn't make any attempt to show me the same love and affection. With time, I simply accepted it. It wasn't like I had a choice. I had tried everything I could to get my parents to treat me the same way since I was a child, but nothing seemed to work. It seemed as if they were infatuated with my sister, and I would never be good enough. So why bother attempting to impress individuals who will never recognize your positive qualities and will only compare you to your sister? After a while, I just quit trying. I started living my own life, and I must admit that it made my life a lot happier. I still kept in touch with my parents, though, because I didn't want to cause any problems. I knew they were very concerned with keeping up appearances, so if I abruptly stopped talking to them and cut them out of my life, they would make a big deal out of it, and I didn't think the drama would be worth it. So I opted to be there on the surface, but I was actually rather far from them, and they didn't seem to mind since they had my sister to obsess over. That was how it had been for the past few years, until last year, when I got engaged to my longtime partner. Of course, I informed my folks about it. I invited them, but they did not turn up. It wasn't like I missed them much during the wedding, but it was still a bit of a surprise because they didn't have a large crowd. People asked about my parents. Nobody was surprised that my sister did not show up because they knew we had a strained relationship. However, my parents' absence was significant, especially because there was no explanation provided. So, a few days after the wedding, I decided to approach them about it. Even before the wedding, when I realized they had not RSVP'd, I attempted to contact them but received no response. Back then, I suspected something was odd, but I wasn't too concerned because I already had a lot on my plate. However, after the wedding, I desperately needed answers. I am determined to confront my parents once and for all. When I phoned them after everything was done, they finally answered, even though I had assumed they would simply ignore me in the up to the wedding. As soon as they answered the phone, they told me that they were extremely disappointed that they would be unable to attend and that I should have sent them a formal invitation. I was visibly perplexed because I was certain that I had invited them. My husband and I had carefully reviewed the guest list several times to ensure that no one had been left out. We sent out both physical and electronic invitations, and I knew my parents had received one. So, when they indicated they were furious that I hadn't even bothered to send them an invitation during the phone call, I realized something was wrong. While they were telling me how insulted they felt since they hadn't received an invitation, I decided to go check to see if I had sent it, and sure enough, I had. So I knew they were trying to gaslight me, but I didn't say anything. I simply apologized for my mistake and hung up. I was obviously annoyed that they were attempting to make me believe that this was my fault in some way, despite the fact that they had chosen to skip my wedding on purpose for reasons I had no idea about. After that phone call, I informed my husband what had transpired and how my parents had attempted to gaslight me, and he said he was very confident they were just furious that I was marrying before my sister. So that's why they opted to skip the wedding, and now they're trying to dupe me into thinking I had somehow forgotten to invite them, so they can have an explanation without having to admit their mistake. My husband made me realize that they were only concerned because I was marrying before my sister. At first, I didn't comprehend what he was saying, but then he brought up other examples. First, when I called my parents to tell them I was engaged, they were not pleased at all. They appeared astonished, but I imagined they were surprised that I was calling to inform them at all. Because we had a rather frosty relationship, I only called them before posting about it on social media because I felt it was my obligation as a daughter and it would be more polite to do it. So I assumed that was what they were surprised about, that I was informing them. But my husband informed me that he could tell they weren't thrilled because the look on their faces wasn't one of surprise. He didn't mention it to me at the time since he didn't want to make a big deal out of it or stress me up. But even during the engagement party, he noticed that my parents were sitting in a corner pouting, rather than chatting with everyone. And when he went to speak with them, just to be courteous, he discovered that they were on the phone with my sister, and he could hear her crying on the other end while they tried to console her. It didn't take a genius to figure out why they weren't too pleased with my entire engagement scenario, and even though he couldn't hear what my sister was saying on the other line, he could make an educated guess. When my parents realized he was approaching, they set down their phones and began acting silly with him. But it was too late. I was startled to learn these facts, but they helped me explain a number of other things. The only reason he hadn't told me anything was that he didn't want to make me nervous about the wedding, which I was already stressed about preparing. It wasn't until after the wedding that I learned about it, and I'm very sure that was the real reason they didn't attend. It couldn't have been conceivable that they didn't receive the invitation, especially because I double-checked everything. So after they didn't show up for my wedding, I determined I wasn't going to speak to them anymore, not even for the sake of appearance. I'd had enough, and if my sister was their sole priority, they could stay with it. A couple of weeks ago, I learned from some of my family that my sister is engaged. Apparently, she's been with this guy for a year, and when he proposed, she accepted. Good for her. And I know my parents are overspending on this wedding since they have been talking about it online. They've already spoken with a few of their pals and started looking into large venues, which will be quite expensive. My sister has been informing our relatives that she will be shopping at Vera Wang, and I know it will be a big deal. I didn't give it much thought, but a couple of days ago, my parents contacted me and informed me that it was extremely inappropriate for me to try to disrupt my sister's wedding. I had no idea what they were talking about, so I assured them I hadn't mentioned anything. Neither did I care, because we hadn't spoken in a long time, and I wasn't interested in fighting with them right now. But they told me that they knew I had spent the previous 8 months after my wedding talking trash about my family, and they were very disappointed in me. They informed me that all of the relatives they had communicated with so far had expressed no interest in attending the engagement party and had already begun to make reasons for not attending the wedding. They knew I was involved since my sister was evidently furious that our family would not attend her engagement celebration. She had decided to vent to a cousin of ours, and she had been told that apparently I had been telling everyone in the family that my parents had not shown up at the wedding because they were upset that my sister was not marrying before me, as they would have preferred, because they think she is prettier and more successful. They accused me of painting them in a negative light, and as a result of my claims, our family was unwilling to attend the engagement party, let alone the wedding. And there, they had a point, because after the wedding, if my relatives asked me why my parents hadn't shown there, I would simply tell them what I thought. I was really outraged at my parents' actions, and after hearing what my husband had said, I didn't think I needed to hold back. Anyway, whenever I ran into a relative or was attending a family gathering, and they asked whether I finally had an answer as to why my parents were not present at my wedding, I would just tell them the truth. I didn't think I was gossiping about them or doing anything improper because in my judgment, they couldn't be bothered to keep up appearances during my wedding, despite the fact that they had always been quite concerned about doing so, because they prioritized protecting my sister's feelings above all else. So I'd learnt my lesson. I wasn't going to put in any effort, and after my husband told me, I decided that being honest was the way to go. I didn't truly consider the repercussions at the moment. I thought people deserved to know why they weren't at the wedding. I told them what my husband told me. I also told them about my talk with my parents which I described as informal. I didn't try to sound sympathetic, but I also didn't mince things. What I didn't understand was that words spread, and by now, almost everyone in the family knows that my parents first skipped my wedding because they didn't want my sister to feel terrible about their attending, and also because she was more important to them. On top of that, they attempted to deceive me into believing that I had somehow missed inviting them. Even though they didn't say anything to me directly, my family has decided not to attend my sister's wedding. They do not want anything to do with my parents, and the cousin who told my sister about all of this had overheard her discussing it for quite some time. This girl is a gossip, so I'm not surprised she opted to share that information with my sister and parents. I'm quite sure she just wants to see the drama unfold, and she's in luck since my folks are quite unhappy. They believe that I sabotage them on purpose. They believe that I am the one who is jealous of my sister, which is why I intentionally spread these rumors and made them appear like the bad ones. They said my husband made up the entire affair. Nothing of the sort had occurred. They even accused me of not inviting them on purpose so that I could use the excuse to seek compassion from relatives and portray them as villains. I do not agree with any of that. I'm very sure my spouse was speaking the truth, and I know I sent those invitations to them. What I do find strange is that, because of what I told my relatives, they have decided not to attend my sister's wedding. So, Ida, for informing my entire family about the real reason, my parents did not attend my wedding. Edit. There are various reasons why I don't get along with my sister and never have. The main one is that she's constantly trying to bring me down. It's not enough for her that our parents already prefer her over me. She wants me to be aware of this at all times. I have no idea what her problem is, but she has always attempted to rub it in my face since we were children. It's not like I didn't realize she was a lot more successful than me when we were kids. She was constantly at the top of her class, excelled in sports and other activities, and was also quite popular. That should have been sufficient for her. But for some reason, she made it a point to make me feel horrible about it by making nasty remarks, comments, and the like. She had a group of friends who, despite the fact that I was their senior, tried to bully me every day. The only reason I never made a big issue about it was that I didn't believe they were important enough for me to address. At worst, they were a small inconvenience to me. I found them annoying, but I didn't really care about them. As for my sister, I had hoped that she would eventually grow out of this dumb little habit. But she didn't. She continued to behave in the same manner, making jokes about me, making digs at me, and so on, far into her adulthood, to the point that I simply stopped showing up at places because of her. I do not want to make any drama. I'm typically a non-confrontational person who dislikes interacting with folks I don't like. I basically try to avoid them altogether. So, over the past few years, I've only attended family occasions when absolutely required. However, when it comes to minor issues, I tend to avoid them simply because I do not want to see my sister. So that's why I don't get along with her. And I don't regret it. I tried so hard to get along with her when we were youngsters. However, you eventually realize that this is not the type of person you want in your life. That's the kind of revelation I had with my sister a few years ago, then again with my parents recently. The only reason I'd held on to these ties for so long, despite the agony they'd given me so far, was that they were all I had as family. I mean, I had my relatives, but it wasn't the same. However, I now believe that my relatives are probably more like my family than these people ever were. Update 1. Hey, after reading the comments here, I decided to ignore my parents, since I realized that exposing the truth to the rest of my family was not as horrible as they made it out to be. I simply stated my point of view. I do not need to apologize for it. So, when they started messaging me constantly, I decided to respond and say the same thing to them. Then, they started arguing with me, telling me that I had done everything on purpose, that I wanted to damage their image for the rest of the family just because I had always been envious of my sister. We were talking over the phone, and before I picked up, I had already determined that this time I was going to let it all out. Because I needed to vent. As soon as they accused me of being envious of my sister, I simply agreed. I told them that yes, I was jealous of her, but not for the reasons they imagined. I wasn't envious of her because she was more accomplished or more conventionally gorgeous. I had always been envious of her since, rather than being neutral, The two of them had always preferred her to me. I could understand the rest of the world selecting her over me for the reasons I indicated. But what about my own parents? That really hurt, and I was tired of pretending I didn't care, because things like this reach people. And the idea that this shouldn't bother me, that I should just brush it aside and act that everything is fine, is also extremely unrealistic. But I did it because I anticipated my parents to eventually appreciate me for who I am. But that never occurred. Even when I wasn't trying, I was unconsciously attempting to make them appreciate me. That's why I'd stayed quiet about their horrific treatment of me for so many years. However, when I eventually spoke up, they objected because it made them seem bad. Okay, rough. Because if they truly believe that the truth makes them appear terrible, they may be the source of the problem, not me. If they wanted to appear as excellent parents, perhaps they should have just been decent parents, and I'd only have positive things to say about them. But they had given me this ammunition themselves, so they have no reason to complain about me, making them seem terrible. If I wanted to tell my relatives how my parents treated me, how they always preferred my sister over me, and make a big issue about it, I would do so. They had already accused me of playing the victim to gain sympathy. So, maybe I was doing just that. Instead of calling me repeatedly to persuade me to go back on my word, perhaps they should try talking to my relatives and convincing them that they are not the individuals I made them out to be. Perhaps it would be a more effective use of their time, but talking to me would get them nowhere because I'd already said everything I needed to say. And if my relatives trust me, that's great. The basic line was that I wasn't going to make things better for them. I am not responsible for anyone else's reputation, other than myself. My parents simply went silent, most likely because they were unfamiliar with my behavior. They had not expected an explosion like this from me, because I had previously stated that I am a non-confrontational person who is also quiet and introverted. They undoubtedly assumed I was going to let this go as well, but I was tired of having them walk all over me in the hopes that they would eventually appreciate me. But after a few seconds, my parents told me that because I had already determined that they were bad parents, and I had such strong feelings about their inability to raise me in the same way that they had raised my sister, they had decided that it might be time to let go. So far, they had expected me to resolve the matter because they felt I was family. They assumed I was their daughter, so I'd be concerned. But obviously I was glad they were hurting, so they assured me they had no expectations of me, and that I could live my life whatever I chose. They would never trouble me again. They concluded their little address by reminding me that, at the end of the day, we were both their daughters. Perhaps I just felt like they had always chosen my sister over me because I was the insecure one. But it wasn't their fault, and I shouldn't blame them. So, in the end, they couldn't admit that some of this was their fault. They expected me to be the evil guy. It took a lot of work for me to keep my mouth shut, but I eventually didn't say anything since I knew disputing with them would be fruitless, and I didn't want to end up talking in circles. So if they wanted to make me the villain, that was great with me. At the very least, it would get them off of my back. But now that I've made my point and told them how I've felt throughout the years, I feel a lot lighter and healthier. Whatever happens with my sister's wedding, they can handle it. I honestly don't care. That's their problem to solve. I am simply going to do my thing. Update 2. Hey. I had that talk with my parents a few days ago, and today my sister contacted me and texted me that anything I said to my parents was completely wrong, and they were quite furious about it. After all, they reared me. They had done everything for me as parents. And now I couldn't simply turn around and tell them that they hadn't done enough, because that would be ungrateful of me. She was playing all holier than thou, and I knew she was just enjoying the opportunity to lord it over me, pretending to be the epitome of elegance and dignity when she was far from it. It greatly irritated me, so I didn't respond to the text. I just blocked her. I believed that would be enough. But then a few hours later, my husband called to tell me he had received a text from an unknown number, and sure enough, it was my sister texting him. She had told him the same thing, and then told him that he needed to get me to apologize to our parents, since what I was doing was extremely wrong. And now that he's a member of the family, he can't just sit back and watch things like this happen, especially when it makes me look like a complete fool. I was outraged that she had the arrogance to text my husband, but my husband found it quite amusing. He thought it was hilarious that my family thought emailing him and asking him to me apologize would work. And because of him, I was able to laugh about it and brush it off. Otherwise, I might have gone overboard. I haven't told anyone about what's been going on with my parents in the last few days because I haven't had time to chat with most people due to my job schedule. But then, if someone asks me or I run into somebody, I'm going to be really upfront with them, because I'm sure that's what my parents will be most furious about. I'm not typically like gossip, but if it's making my folks upset, I'm all for it. And the greatest part? It's not even gossip. I'm just telling them my side of the story. I don't even need to make anything up. I just have to tell them how they really behave, and it's terrible enough that people despise them. The funniest part of all of this is that, despite the fact that they already know I'm not going to hold back any longer, nor will I protect the family's reputation by being silent, they're still going out of their way to make things worse for themselves by pulling these antics. Update 3. Hello. So it's been a couple of weeks since my last update, and my parents have begun to inform everyone in the family that I've been spreading false rumors about them in order to make them look bad. All because I was jealous of my sister and couldn't bear the thought of people attending her wedding, which was going to be much grander and more extravagant than mine. I was quite sure they thought this technique would work, making me look like the evil guy and all. However, the majority of our family members had already decided to support me. And to be honest, I don't need to try. They suspected my parents of overindulging my sister when we were children. So my account of events was far more credible to them than whatever my parents were trying to persuade them to believe. Instead of simply taking their word for it, they informed me what my saying about me behind my back. In fact, their entire scheme flopped. Because now people are laughing at them and their idiocy alongside me. This is the epitome of karma, and I'm so delighted they chose to expose everyone to their true colors. Thanks for watching and diving into this wild family drama with me. If you love Reddit family drama, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one.